The audience was laughing. The band was playing. And then Oprah saw her. Everything stopped. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday night at The Tonight Show. Studio 6B at 30 Rockefeller Plaza was packed with 240 excited audience members who had waited months for tickets. The Roots were in their groove, Questlove's drumsticks dancing in the air. Jimmy Fallon was doing what he does best, making America smile. His guest that night was royalty. Not just any celebrity, but the woman who defined what it meant to connect with people on television. Oprah Winfrey. The interview had been going perfectly. They'd laughed about old stories, shared behind-the-scenes moments from their respective shows, and Oprah was in the middle of telling a heartwarming anecdote about meeting everyday heroes when it happened. Mid-sentence, mid-gesture, Oprah's voice simply stopped. Her hand, which had been animated and expressive, froze in the air, pointing toward the audience. Her eyes locked onto someone in the third row. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by something nobody in that studio had ever seen from Oprah Winfrey: complete, unguarded shock. Jimmy noticed immediately. You don't host a live show for over a decade without developing a sixth sense for when something goes wrong. His head turned, following Oprah's gaze into the audience. The Roots, sensing the shift, let the music fade. One by one, 240 people stopped laughing and started looking. And there, in seat 3C, sat a woman in her early 60s with silver-gray hair, wearing a simple floral dress, both hands covering her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. The studio, moments ago filled with music and laughter, had become a cathedral of silence. And nobody, not the producers, not the camera operators, not even Jimmy himself, knew what was about to happen next. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. To understand this moment, we need to go back 6 hours earlier, to 2 p.m. that same afternoon. Studio 6B was in pre-show preparation mode. Interns were checking seat assignments, the production team was running through the evening's schedule, and Jimmy was in his dressing room reviewing note cards. That's when Sarah Mitchell arrived at the NBC security desk with a ticket she'd purchased 3 months earlier. She was alone. No family, no friends. Just a woman with a dream she'd carried for 40 years. Sarah wasn't from New York. She'd taken a Greyhound bus from a small town in Ohio, a 20-hour journey that had left her exhausted but determined. She'd packed one small suitcase, her life savings in her purse, and a letter she'd written and rewritten so many times the paper had started to wear thin at the creases. The letter was addressed to Oprah Winfrey, but Sarah had no illusions about actually delivering it. She just wanted to be in the same room. To see the woman who had, quite literally, saved her life. In 1994, Sarah Mitchell had been a different person. Trapped in an abusive marriage, raising 3 children in poverty, she'd reached a point where she couldn't see a way forward. Every day felt like drowning. She'd started planning her exit from the world, convinced her children would be better off without her. Then one afternoon, while folding laundry in front of the television, she heard a voice. Oprah's voice. The episode was about women who had rebuilt their lives after trauma. One guest, a woman who looked exactly like Sarah, who'd suffered exactly like Sarah, stood on that stage and said something that cracked through Sarah's despair. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. Sarah didn't leave her marriage that day. It took 2 more years. But she started making choices. Small ones at first. She enrolled in night classes. She opened a secret bank account. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could become someone different. By 1996, she and her children were out. By 2000, she had a college degree. By 2005, she was running a women's shelter in her hometown. And through all of it, she kept a photo of Oprah taped to her bathroom mirror with those words written beneath it. You are what you choose to become. She never told anyone this story. Not her children, who only knew the strong version of their mother. Not the women she'd helped at the shelter. Not even her closest friends. But she'd carried it, and carried that letter, and now, sitting in C3C, she was just hoping to breathe the same air as the woman who'd given her permission to live. The show had started at 5:35 p.m. sharp. Jimmy's monologue killed, as always. The audience was hot, laughing at every beat. Sarah laughed too, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty guest chair, waiting. When the announcement came that Oprah Winfrey would be coming out after the commercial break, Sarah's heart started racing so fast she thought she might pass out. She gripped the armrests of her seat and reminded herself to breathe. This is just to see her. That's all. Just to be in the same room. Oprah walked out to thunderous applause, waving to the audience with that familiar grace. She hugged Jimmy, settled into the guest chair, and the interview began. She was radiant, funny, profound as always. She talked about her new book club selection, about the power of storytelling, about how the most important stories are often the ones people carry silently inside them. Sarah hung on every word, tears already forming because even just hearing that voice in person was more than she'd ever hoped for. Then Oprah started telling a story about a woman she'd met years ago who had written her a letter about escaping an impossible situation. She was gesturing as she spoke, her hands sweeping toward the audience to emphasize a point about human resilience, when her eyes landed on Sarah. And something impossible happened. Recognition. Not the vague recognition of seeing a face in a crowd, but the specific, piercing recognition of seeing someone she knew. Oprah's hand stopped mid-air. Her sentence ended halfway through. Her entire body oriented toward that one woman in the third row. "Oh my God!" Oprah said, so quietly the microphone barely caught it. Jimmy looked confused, then concerned. "Ma'am," Oprah said louder now, standing up from her chair. "Ma'am, in the floral dress. You." Sarah couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Could barely breathe. 239 other people were looking at her now, and she wanted to disappear. But Oprah was walking toward her, coming down the steps from the stage, and Jimmy was following, not knowing what else to do. Behind the scenes, every producer in the control room was frantically trying to figure out what was happening. The director kept the cameras rolling on instinct. The assistant director started scrolling through audience member information, looking for anything that might explain this. And Jimmy Fallon, who had navigated 1,000 unexpected moments on live television, made a split-second decision: trust Oprah. Follow her lead. Let this moment be whatever it needed to be. Oprah reached Sarah's row. The audience members next to Sarah quickly shifted, creating space. Oprah knelt down in front of Sarah's seat, taking the older woman's hands in her own. "You wrote to me," Oprah said, and it wasn't a question. 1994, you wrote to me about wanting to disappear, about your children, about feeling like you were drowning. Sarah nodded, unable to speak, tears flowing freely now. "I never forgot that letter," Oprah continued, her own voice breaking. "I kept it. It's in a box in my office. I've read it dozens of times over the years, especially on days when I've wondered if any of this matters. I've prayed for you. I've wondered if you made it." The studio was absolutely silent. Jimmy stood a few feet away, his usual playful expression replaced by something softer, more reverent. He understood now that he was witnessing something sacred. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was life, raw and real, happening in front of cameras but beyond their reach. "I made it," Sarah finally whispered, her voice so quiet the boom operator had to adjust to catch it. "Because of you. I made it." She reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out that folded, worn letter. "I brought this. I didn't think I'd ever give it to you. I just wanted to be here. To say thank you in my heart, even if you never knew." Oprah took the letter, unfolded it carefully, and even though she couldn't read it through her tears, she held it like it was made of gold. Jimmy, watching this, felt something shift inside him. He'd interviewed thousands of people. He'd laughed with celebrities, danced with musicians, played games with actors. But this moment of pure human connection, this was why television existed. Not to distract people from their lives, but to remind them that their lives mattered. He looked at his stage manager, made a decision, and waved off the commercial break cue. They'd stay here as long as this moment needed. Oprah stood, gently pulling Sarah up with her. "Will you come with me?" she asked. Sarah nodded, still crying, and Oprah led her by the hand up onto the stage. The audience, finally released from their stunned silence, began to applaud. Not the enthusiastic applause of entertainment, but something slower, deeper. The applause of witnessing something true. Jimmy met them at his desk, and did something he'd never done in over a decade of hosting. He took off his suit jacket and draped it around Sarah's shoulders. She was shaking, from emotion and shock, and he wanted her to feel safe. "Sarah," Jimmy said gently. "I'm Jimmy. And I think everyone here would love to know your story, if you're willing to share it." Sarah looked at Oprah, who nodded encouragingly, still holding her hand. And then, to an audience of millions watching at home and 240 people in that studio, Sarah Mitchell told her story. Not the polished, rehearsed version. The real version. The ugly, painful, beautiful version of how she'd wanted to die and chosen to live. How a voice on a television had reached through her despair. How she'd rebuilt a life, piece by piece, and now ran a shelter where she told other women that same truth: you are what you choose to become. The Roots, those cool, composed musicians, were crying. The camera operators were crying. The pages and interns were crying. And Jimmy Fallon, who'd built a career on making people laugh, stood there with tears streaming down his face, holding the hand of a woman he never met until 10 minutes ago, understanding that some moments transcend every script. When Sarah finished speaking, Oprah reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a pen. She took the worn letter, turned it over, and wrote something on the back. Then she pressed it into Sarah's hands. "This is my personal email address," Oprah said. "Not the show email. Mine. I want to know about every woman you help. I want to support your shelter. And I want you to know that your letter didn't just help you. It helped me. It reminded me why I do what I do. You gave me a gift 30 years ago, and you just gave it to me again tonight." Jimmy cleared his throat, composed himself enough to speak. "Sarah, I'm going to do something I don't normally do. The Tonight Show wants to support your shelter. We're going to make a donation tonight. And more than that, we're going to share your information so that anyone watching who needs help, who's feeling the way you felt, knows where to find it." He looked directly into camera one. "And if you're watching this, if you're in that dark place, please hear Sarah's story. Please hold on. Please choose to become." The commercial break came 23 minutes later than scheduled. Network executives were furious until they saw the social media explosion. Within an hour, #Sarah's story was trending worldwide. The shelter's donation page crashed from traffic. And Jimmy Fallon's publicist received 4,000 emails before midnight, all variations of the same message. "Thank you for not cutting to commercial. Share this video and subscribe, because stories like Sarah's need to be told. Make sure this is never forgotten." After the show, after the cameras stopped rolling, something else happened that never made it to television. Jimmy walked Sarah back to her seat to collect her purse. The audience had cleared out, but the Roots were still there, packing up their instruments. Questlove called out, "Hey Sarah, hold up." He walked over, carrying his drumsticks. "These are from tonight's show," he said, handing them to her. "I want you to have them. To remember that sometimes the most important beat isn't the one we plan to play." Sarah took them, confused but touched, and Questlove explained. "Music is about rhythm, about knowing when to play and when to stop." Oprah stopped talking. Jimmy stopped the show. The band stopped playing. Because sometimes the most powerful sound is the space we create for someone else's voice. Jimmy drove Sarah to her hotel that night. Not a driver. Him personally. They sat in his car outside her budget hotel in Queens, and she thanked him for the 20th time. "You don't need to thank me," Jimmy said. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I spend so much time trying to make people laugh that sometimes I forget that's not the point. The point is connection. You and Oprah connected tonight in a way that's going to ripple out forever. I just got to be in the room for it. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out something else. An old photograph of herself from 1994, standing in front of the television, hollow-eyed and defeated. She handed it to Jimmy. This is who I was, she said quietly. Then she pulled out her phone and showed him a recent photo of her with 12 women at her shelter, all smiling, all survivors. This is who I became. Jimmy looked at both photos for a long moment. Then he did something that would become part of the Tonight Show legend. He took off his tie, the one he'd worn during the most important show of his career, and handed it to Sarah. Keep this, he said. Not as a souvenir. As a reminder that when someone is brave enough to share their truth, everything else stops. The show stops. The jokes stop. The world stops. Because that truth matters more than anything we could ever plan. 3 months later, Sarah's shelter received over $2 million in donations. Oprah became a regular supporter and visited twice. And Jimmy Fallon kept a copy of that 1994 photograph on his dressing room mirror with new words written beneath it. Some nights, we don't make people laugh. Some nights, we remind them why living matters. Those are the nights that count. The tie Sarah received that night hangs framed in the shelter's entrance, with a simple plaque beneath it. The night the show stopped, and humanity started.